Father, thank you, Almighty God, for being our God, being our Father. And Father, thank you for the one who knows our needs, the one who cares for us, the one who protects us, the one who guides us and shows us the way, oh God. I pray that you just teach us, that you, from your word today, that you hide me behind the cross, and I would speak only the things that you would have me to speak. And Father, I thank you and I love you. We love you and we worship you in Jesus' name. As we come into the Thanksgiving week, it's often that we naturally give thanks to God for all that He does, for all that He has done and all that He is doing. But it's so important to remember those things that He has done, and I think in specific areas in our lives. Count your blessings in all areas of our lives, but I think of one specific area today that He wants us to really focus in on, and that's His deliverance and for His protection. We often we overlook that. We overlook God's deliverance, we overlook His protection, we overlook those little things that He does in order to keep us from harm and danger. But it's important to be reminded of those things, as we're going to find out today. It's going to be important for us to remind ourselves of those very things that He has delivered us from, and that He has protected us from. And I look back even in my own life, as a young person, and I look back and I see, there was how many untold protections and deliverances that God had on me as a young person, as a child, as an adult, even now, that I didn't even see that God had done. Those that were known, that could be visible, and those that were unknown. And God reminds me, He helps me, and I reflect on those things, and I think about, wow, God, you deliver me from all those things. Every single thing that I've experienced in my life, your hand was there to guide me. Your hand was there to protect me. Your hand was there to lead me. Think about your own life. Think about all the deliverances that God has rescued you from, all the protection that God has kept you from, that God has provided for you along the way. And you think about it and say, my goodness. As you think about it, there's stuff that you know, that you're fully aware of, but then there's things that you're not. The unseen things. And these are the kinds of things, as we're going to look at today, that we need to be reminded of before God and say, God, thank you. And not only do we say thank you, but reminded that God, I need to rely upon you. Like Peter. As Peter was, as we're going to find out, Peter was arrested and his life was very threatened. He was going to be killed. And as we find out in Acts chapter 12, we're going to read the whole chapter, verses 1 through 25, that we are going to, Peter was relying upon his God. The church was relying upon God to deliver Peter in their circumstance, in their hour of need. And just to be reminded of that, and then to be thankful for when God does His deliverance. So let's go on here. We're going to be looking at Acts chapter 12, verses 1 through 25. Let's look at, we're going to look at 3 points today. We're going to look at Peter's arrest, Acts 12, 1 through 5. We're going to look at Peter's deliverance, Acts 12, verses 6 through 11. We're going to look at Peter's testimony to the believers, Acts 12, 12 to 17. And then we're going to look at the astonishment and fate of the soldiers, and the fate of Herod. Acts 12, verses 18 to 25. So we're looking at 4 specific points here. Peter's deliverance. The night before Peter was to be presented, we're going to be looking at verses 6 through 11. We're going to be looking at verses, Peter's arrest. We're going to be looking at Acts. We're going to be looking at verses 1 through 5. So let's look at these. Let's look at these verses here. Herod Agrippa, in verse 1, lays his hands on some from the church and mistreats them. In other words, Herod Agrippa was the son of Herod the Great. Herod the Great was the one who was alive when Jesus was killed and was crucified. And now this is his son, and he reigned from 40 A.D. to 44. So we see that Herod Agrippa was alive during this time. And so Herod Agrippa was mean, just like his father, but he wanted to, his whole goal was to please the Jews and to keep peace. And so if the Christians were a opposition to the Jews, then he was going to be in full agreement with doing whatever he needed to do in order to get rid of the Christians and to persecute the Christians. And it goes on here and it says, James, the brother of John, in verse 2, is martyred by Herod. So, in order to please the Jews and to get rid of key people within the church, James was one of the three that were closest to Jesus. There was Peter, there was James, and there was John. James and John were brothers. They were known as the sons of thunder. But he was killed by Herod Agrippa here. So, could you imagine how the church was feeling at that point? How the church was frightened, how the church was scared, how the church was feeling some kind of way about what's Herod going to do next. So Herod thinking, well, if I kill James, who's the next leader in line? Who's the next person who is leading here? And who is that? That's Peter. So if I arrest Peter, then I'm going to be continuing to please the Jews, and I'm going to continue to do what I need to do in order to get rid of the Christian church. So if I get rid of the leaders, what's going to happen? The people will scatter. The people will fall away. So he arrests Peter. And so around Peter put Peter in prison, and they have 4 squads of soldiers. There's a lot of soldiers that are guarding this one man. 4 squads of soldiers. A lot of soldiers that are guarding Peter at this point. And so until the Passover, so Peter can be presented before the people. So he wanted to keep Peter in prison so that after Passover, that he could have Peter presented before the people, and he could do before the people, I have one of the Christian leaders here, and I'm going to do to him whatever I feel like doing, just so he could please what? The people, the Jewish people. So he was a very evil man. He was a very wicked man. He wasn't a man that was a very kind man, especially to the Christian church. So we see here that he was all about pleasing the people and not about pleasing God at all. And so Peter was kept in prison, but if you look at verse 5, it says, Peter was kept in prison, but fervent prayer was being made for Peter by the church. Fervent means that people were really praying hard. They were really praying, like really seriously, intently, with all of their heart. And what were they praying for? They came together because James had gotten killed. Now Peter's in prison. So what are they thinking? They're thinking that Peter is going to be killed too. So what do you do in a time like that? You go and you pray. You pray with however you see fit before the Lord. You do with all your heart And that's what the church did. The church came together to pray for Peter because Peter's life was on the line. They could have said, no, we're going to run away. I don't know, we could just cower in fear. I don't know. What am I going to do? Oh no, here's one of our leaders. What are we going to do? Oh no, we don't know. But the church had the presence of mind enough, they had the relationship with the Lord enough to know that the best way for deliverance, the best way for Peter to be taken care of, the best way for Peter to be protected was what? Was prayer. Knowing that the only one who could do the protection was whom? God. The only one who could do the deliverance was whom? God. Because he was the only one at this time that could protect them. He was the only one at this time who could protect Peter, who could deliver Peter, and protect them as a people. So this is what the church did. The church responded the way the church should have responded. They went fervently to prayer to pray for Peter. Now in their mind, they're praying, God, just protect Peter. Just guard him. God, just do whatever you have to do in order to keep him, God. But I don't think they were ever, I don't know if they had in their mind of thinking that God was going to deliver them. Now think about Herod. Herod was the king there at that time. And he had 4 squads of soldiers and Peter in prison. And there was no way that they could bust Peter out of prison. There's no way that they could, that they in their own means, in their own strength, could get Peter out of prison. So the best that they were hoping for as they prayed was that Peter would be protected. But God had other things in mind. And I think that and what they were praying for Peter, praying for his protection, but they weren't going beyond that. They weren't expecting that God was going to do something greater than what they could even imagine or even thought. They weren't looking to see that God could deliver them, could deliver Peter in a supernatural and miraculous way. And often that's what happens with us. We pray and we buckle down, we pray because we're in a dire circumstance, we're in a dire situation, and we pray and we really pray, God, just protect me. Do this, God, please, God, God, please, God, please, God. But then we don't really think that God's going to, we think that God's going to do one thing. We pray that God's going to do one thing, but then we don't believe that God's going to do over and above what we're praying. That God's going to go beyond even what we could even imagine or even think. And so I think that's where the church was at that point. Because they couldn't think that God would even deliver Peter, would want to deliver Peter. But God had other things in mind. Yes, God wanted his people to pray, but God wanted his people to believe him for great things that could go beyond whatever they could even imagine or even think. Because who would have ever thought that Peter could have been delivered when he had 4 squads of soldiers around him in a deep, heavy guarded prison by the king? Who would have even thought that deliverance could have even been possible? So, and so with us, the idea is that when we pray, we have to go, and we're in dire circumstances, or at any time, we have to believe God over and above what we could even think or even imagine, or even think what's even possible. How could this even happen? How could this even, I'll just give you an example. A dire circumstance where someone's sick, and someone has stage 4 cancer. And you're thinking that, well, God, just protect them and just comfort them and just be with them, God. And God has in mind is that he wants to be able to heal that person. Make him completely whole, cancer-free. God can do that. He's the maker of heaven and earth. But in our own minds, what God wants us to think is that he can do whatever he wants. He can make that person whole, where he can deliver. But we have to, in our own mind, and what he was trying to teach with the church here, is that we have to go beyond what we can even think, or we can even imagine. Because God is who? He's the maker of what? Heaven and earth. And he can do that because he's God. But when we come to pray, we have to really, truly believe that in our hearts before God, no matter what the circumstance is. Well, let's go on here, and it says in verses 6 through 11, it says, Peter's deliverance. It says, the night before Peter was to be presented, he was heavily guarded with chains. And so here's the picture here. He's lying down, he's sleeping, and he's chained to guards on either side of him. He's got one guard, he's lying down here, he's got one guard here with chains. Handcuffed, so to speak. So, him being delivered was like, I don't think so. There's guards in front of the door. There's guards all over the prison. And there was gates everywhere. And yet, God was going to do something that was going to astound everyone. And I want us to respond. I want us to see how people respond to what God does. Okay, let's go on here. And it says here in verse 7, the angel of the Lord appears to Peter. In other words, this was an angel that was sent by God to deliver Peter. And it says, get up quickly. And what happens? His chains fall off. His chains fall off. In other words, he was lying between two guards. The angel comes and he appears, and there's a great light in the room. Didn't even wake up the guards. Because God supernaturally what? Kept the guards asleep, didn't he? God supernaturally did what? The chains supernaturally just fall off. Because who? Because God was in control. Because God was doing the deliverance. Because God was doing something that man could not do. God was doing something beyond what anyone could have even imagined or even thought. How could man do any of that? How could man be delivered in a situation like that? Look at verse 8. He says, the angel says to Peter, gird yourself. In other words, get things on, get ready, put your shoes on, put your clothes on, gird yourself. In other words, put things together, get things together. You got to move quickly, Peter. You got to move quickly. You got to move with some urgency. But get things together. Gird yourself up. Put them on. Pull up your bootstraps. Put on your cloak. Put on your sandals, because we're going. And then in Peter's mind, is thinking, is this a vision? Is this a dream? I'm sleeping here, and now I see this angel, the light in the room, and he's telling me to get up. The chains fall off. This can't be happening. He's telling me, get up, gird yourself, in other words, get ready, get going, because you're being delivered. And Peter's thinking, because you know how you are when you just wake up. Your mind's maybe a little bit foggy, it's not as clear as it could be, and you're thinking maybe, well, this is a dream. Often we remember dreams when we first wake up after them. So Peter's thinking in his own mind, maybe it was just a dream. Maybe it was just something that I was just, couldn't think in his own mind, he couldn't imagine in his own mind that this was even happening. Even though Peter witnessed all these miracles, he witnessed all these things that Jesus had done, he couldn't imagine that this was actually, in reality, happening to him. He was thinking it was all a vision and all a dream to him. And then verses 8 and 9 says, the angel says, follow me. Peter follows him, but thinks it's a vision. So, but Peter's following the instructions of the angels. And you look at verse 10, it says, Peter passes with the guards, and out through the gates he goes. In other words, all the guards that were guarding the doors, all the guards that were guarding the entranceways, all the guards that were guarding the gates, Peter goes and passes them. How could Peter... I can understand them not seeing an angel, but how could they not see Peter, who was a human being? How could they not see him? Because God supernaturally blinded the eyes of the guards. God supernaturally unlocked the gate to the prison so that Peter could go out. And all of a sudden, Peter finds himself on the outside of the gate. And what happens? And the angel is gone. The angel disappears. But Peter's free. Peter's delivered. And Peter's thinking to himself, what just happened? Here I am on the outside of the prison, and I'm free, and I didn't get caught. My chains were undone. I go past all these guards. I go through these gates that were locked and secure. And here I am now. This is where I am. How did I get here? How did I get here? And then Peter comes to his senses, and he realizes that this was something that only God could have done. This was something that God had delivered. And realizes that God, in verse 11 says, Peter comes to himself and realizes that this was a deliverance that only God could have done. And he realizes it, and he understands this was something only God could have protected him from. I remember well, just think about in your own life. When you think about, you pray for something, and then it happens, but it happened in such a way that you couldn't believe that it happened that way. How did this happen? And you find yourself in a place where you're astonished that what has just happened to you, well, what just happened? It was like you were praying, and all of a sudden, there's the answer is. There's the situation. There you are, and what? You're delivered. You're set free. You're a free person. But you're astonished, saying, how did that happen? But then you come to your senses, and you realize, hey, this was something that God had done. I'll give you an example, too. I remember, this as a young person, I remember driving in a car, and this is when I was in rebellion towards the Lord. I was still not following God. I remember I had a little Ford Pinto station wagon. It was a death trap, but it was a little station wagon. A little four-seater station wagon. It was like sardines being in that car. And I remember I just got into a party, and this was at a time where I was drinking heavily. I was still doing drugs. I went to the party, and I drank. I got really, really intoxicated, and I had done some drugs there as well. So I wasn't in a good frame of mind. But I had friends with me. I took the friends with me, and I drove the friends there, but they wanted to ride home. And this was like maybe 2 o'clock in the morning. So on top of being intoxicated and being high, I was also tired. I'd take these kids home in this little Ford Pinto, and there was probably 6 or 7 kids in the car, more than that car could really hold. So it was that was dangerous in and of itself. I remember weaving in and out, but somehow, some way, I got the kids home, and I got in the driveway, and I got home safe. Prior to that, I had been praying, even though in my state that I was in rebellion towards the Lord. Prior to that, I was praying, God, that you would change my heart. God, that you would do a supernatural work in my heart. God, that you would do something. And you know what? I wasn't expecting God to do it in the way that I thought He would. Because you know what? God protected me that night. Nothing came to the children, the other kids that I had in the car with me. Nothing came to me. Because what? Because God still protected me. Even in my own sin. I had prayed, even in my own sin, God had protected me. I had prayed even before that, saying, God, I don't like what I'm doing, but God help me. God, I don't like what I'm doing. God help me. I didn't think that God would, protect me and guard me, even though I was in my sin. But He did. He delivered me in a supernatural way, because I should have been either arrested or I would have been killed. And I would have all those other kids killed. I remember weaving on the road that night. I do. Like it was yesterday. but God delivered me. A supernatural deliverance for me. He heard my prayer even in my own sin. And if I didn't think he was going to be able to deliver me the way he did, and he did. And that's, I think, the point. That sometimes we're in situations and we're praying, God, help me. We don't think God can deliver us. And he does. And then we're astonished, saying, wow, God, you did that? You worked here in this situation? You did this for me? And you're astonished by how God did that very thing in your life. And you understand what I'm talking about. Like, how did this happen? How did this provision happen? How did this protection happen? How did this happen in my life? And you can't, and you're astonished, but you realize and you understand that it was only by the hand of God that it happened. Because no man could have done that other than God. Well, let's go on here. Peter's testimony to the believers. Acts 12, verses 12 to 17. So we see Peter's astonished by his deliverance, and he realizes and he understands that it was by the hand of God. And then Peter goes to the home of Mary, the mother of John Mark, where many people were praying. So we see a couple things here. John Mark, Mary is the mother of John Mark. The writer, this is a John Mark who wrote, people don't realize this, but this is the same John Mark that wrote the Gospel of Mark. So think about that. Not all the Gospels were written by all apostles. They weren't. Only Matthew and John were written by apostles. The Gospels. John and Luke were not apostles. Mark and Luke were not apostles. So this is John Mark, and this is at his mother's house, and so they're praying. And John Mark was probably there. Probably a young believer at this point. And what is he? And so he sees, and so Peter goes to the house, and he's knocking on the door. This is the middle of the night now. But here people are praying, because they know Peter's in prison. And here comes a servant girl named Rhoda. And Peter's saying, Peter. And she sees Peter, and she's like, how could this be? This is me. Peter's saying, this is me. God deliver me. This is me. Well, she keeps Peter at the gate. She leaves Peter at the gate because she's so excited, and she goes back. What does she do? She tells the others. Well, how do the others respond? Let's look at how the others responded. It says, in verse 15, it says, tell Rhoda that she is out of her mind. It's an angel. So, how did the people who were praying for Peter's deliverance respond to Peter? Respond to Rhoda? You're out of your mind. Like they're saying that God couldn't have done this. You were praying for Peter to be protected, but you weren't praying for people. So, because you weren't praying for Peter to be delivered, well, maybe. So they weren't praying for Peter to be delivered, so they weren't even thinking that direction. They weren't even thinking that that was a possibility. So they're saying, Rhoda, you're out of your mind. There's no way that Peter's standing at that gate. It's probably his angel. But there's no way that God could have delivered Peter. And what are people doing? People were, number one, calling Rhoda a liar, and number two is they were selling God short. Because they were saying that God could not have delivered Peter, even though they were praying for Peter. They were saying, this cannot be true. This is not something that could have happened. You're out of your mind. You're doing something. I don't know, but you're not in the right frame of mind right now. Because God could not have done this. And often that's what we do, is that we say, no, God couldn't have done this. Even though we were praying, we say, no, God couldn't have done it. When something happens astonishingly, and it's something beyond what we were even thinking or even believing, we don't believe it initially, do we? But when we see it for ourselves, listen what happens. Let's go on here. It says, in verse 16, Peter continues to knock. Peter's not going to give up because he knows his testimony. He knows what happened. Peter's not giving up. The people inside see Peter and are amazed. Verse 16. So they see Peter and they're amazed. Wow. My goodness. Look at that. God, you truly are great. And what do the people do at that point? The people realize and understand that this was only done by whom? By the hand of God. And they're in amazement. Now they understand, when they see Peter, flesh and blood, standing before him, now they understand that when God has his way and when God wants to do something, that God is going to do it. No matter what people believe, no matter what people pray, no matter what people think. God's going to have his way and God's going to do what he wants to do. And when people see it, they're going to be astonished. That this is only by the hand of God. And it says, in verse 17, it says, Peter describes his whole deliverance to tell the people to tell James and the brethren. So we see that Peter describes everything that happened, but now go tell Peter and James. James was the head of the church, the head of the Jerusalem church. James was. This was another James who was. He was another apostle. It wasn't James, the brother of John, who of course was killed. But this is another James who was an apostle. He was the head of the Jerusalem church. So now Peter, go tell the others. Go tell James and go tell the others. And so what Peter wanted them to know is that I'm free, I'm delivered, and this was only done by the hand of God. So that the world, so that the church could know, so that the believers could know, so believers could understand that that it was God that had delivered them. It was God that had set Peter free. It was God supernaturally giving a deliverance that went beyond the imagination and the prayers of people, the expectations of people. So Peter wanted to make sure the leaders knew that as well. Because, and who saw that as well? John Mark. An impressionable John Mark who wrote the Gospel of Mark. Who went on missionary journeys with whom? With Paul and Barnabas. So here was an impressionable young man seeing the mighty power and grace of God. Think about that. What a wonderful, powerful testimony. Yet God shows us mercy. But one of the things he wants to encourage us and even challenges, he wanted to encourage and challenge the church was, believe him for the impossible. Believe him when you pray. Believe him to go beyond what you can even imagine or even think. Go beyond what you your wildest imaginations. Don't limit God. Don't put God in a box on what he's able to do and what he's not able to do. What he wants to do and what he doesn't want to do. Don't put expectations on God. Have unlimited expectations of God. Because that's what he's saying here. And believe him for great and mighty and wonderful things. For deliverance that only he can do. And then it goes on here and says, let's look at the last part here. And it says the astonishment and the fate of the soldiers and the fate of Herod. Verses 18 through 25. Now think about that. What happens here? If you look at these verses, you look at verses 18 and 19, what happens to the soldiers here? They're astonished. How could this have happened? How could we have missed this? They were probably the best soldiers that they had. How could these soldiers have allowed Peter, not on my watch? In other words, the guards were watching Peter. That's where that phrase comes from, that idea that this is not going to happen on my watch, not when I'm on guard. And their minds are astonished. How could this thing have happened? But they don't understand and they don't recognize because they don't believe that this is something that only God could have done. And then how does Herod respond? Herod responds by having them killed. Because Herod doesn't understand that this was a supernatural deliverance that only God could have done. See, when you don't believe, you don't understand what God can do and what God wants to do. And so in their minds, they're thinking that this was just, I don't know how it happened, but it did. But Herod, being a very mean and very bad man, had his own soldiers killed. Even though he couldn't explain how they were let go. He was thinking in his own mind, well, these soldiers let Peter go. When in reality, that's not what happened. But Herod wouldn't believe that, because he didn't believe in God, and he wouldn't even have thought that God could have done something like that. Well, let's go on here, and we're going to finish up with this. It says, look at Herod's faith. We see here verses 20 to 25 is that Herod goes, and so after he kills the soldiers, he's going to go, and he goes to this meeting here. If we look at the story, and he's wanting to please the people, and Herod wants to receive the praise of the people. He wants to look good in the eyes of the people. And so he's talking to them, thinking he's going to try and settle a matter here. And as he's talking to the people are looking at him and saying, wow, he has the voice of a God. He speaks as one that's the voice of a God, a mighty man, a mighty powerful man. And at the moment as he said that, because in his heart, what was he thinking? Wow, I'm all that. These people really are looking to me as God. They're really thinking that I'm the greatest speaker in the world. It's all about me. It's all about what I've done, what I'm doing. And then what ends up happening? God sends a little worm in his ear, starts eating his insides out, and he dies immediately at that moment. And Scripture tells us here, because he didn't give glory to God. In other words, he received the glory. People looked at him as if he was a God, and he said, I'm going to receive that. I embrace that. And what did God do? God took him out. And then also is that you can tell also is that God doesn't take lightly to people when people hurt his church, when they hurt his people. And also God was inflicting his revenge on Herod. Because he's the one who had James killed, he was the one who had Peter arrested, he was the one who was persecuting God's church. And so what does God do? God says, I'm not going to let any man receive glory for the glory that belongs to me. And I'm not going to allow my people to be persecuted and hurt by other people because they want glory for themselves. So I'll take this matter into my own hands. And God did. But listen to what happened. God's ultimately glorified. And it says, and verse 24, it says, but the word of the Lord continued to grow and to be multiplied. Even though Herod tried to stop the church, God took care of Herod. God delivered Peter, God took care of Herod, and God's word continued to grow and to multiply. God had his way ultimately in the end. Even though man tried to do his thing, even though man tried to stop the work of God, even though man tried to harm God and God's people, God has deliverance, God had ultimately had his revenge, and God ultimately had his justice, and God's word prevailed, as it always does. And God's word will always prevail in our lives as we trust him. Always. In the end, God's word will always prevail in the end. And God will be glorified. And it goes on here, and lastly in verse 25, it says, Barnabas and Saul returned from Jerusalem when they had fulfilled their mission. In other words, they were taking money from the church in Asia Minor, and then taking in Antioch, and taking it with them, with John, who was also called Mark. In other words, see, this is John Mark. In other words, John Mark came with Peter, came with Barnabas and Saul on their missionary journey. And this is the beginning of the missionary journey of Barnabas and Saul. But John Mark ultimately came with them as they went on their journey. And you can imagine how what John Mark had experienced and seeing at his mother's house and hearing the story of what happened to Peter. You can't imagine what that had impression, that kind of impression it had on him and what he thought. Because God will do what he wants to do, and God's ultimately in control, and God will ultimately have the results that he wants to have. But this is the thing, as we think about in our own lives. Think about the deliverances in your life. Think about the seen and unseen deliverances. As you pray, think about, as you've been praying, God, do this or do this. Help me here, help me there. Let your prayer go beyond what you could even imagine or even think. And look for God for his deliverance. And when he does, and when he accomplishes it, thank him. Thank him for the unseen things that he has done. Thank him for the things that he is doing. And thank him for the things that he will do. Have the heart of, God, you can bring me through this. I thank you for what you've done. I thank you for what you are doing. And God, thank you for what you will do in the days to come. I'm trusting you. I'm believing you for great, mighty things beyond what I can even imagine or even think. I'm trusting you. I'm looking to you. I'm putting all my money in the bank on you. On you, God. And thank you, God, for delivering me. And I'm so thankful, even in my own life, when I think about that one situation when I was in that car. I'm so thankful to God that he delivered me that day. Supernatural. Getting me home safe. And I wouldn't be here today if he didn't. Thank the Lord. Count your blessings for the unseen and for the seen and the unseen things that God has done in your life. Just like he did in the early church, he's still doing today in our lives. Amen? In other words, it wasn't something that they were coerced in, it was something they were taught, but then once they were taught, then it was time to put what they were taught into action. They made that decision. It became their own, and that's maturity. I'll give you a great example of this. And thus when they were acting on it, they did it until the needs of Jerusalem were met. Think of a young person. A young person lives at home. You teach them the best that you can. You teach them about Christ. You teach them about Jesus, and you hope that they receive the Lord. But yet, a child trusts and looks to his parent for the needs to be met. Trusts and looks to them and for guidance and direction and for the way they want them to go. And that's important. But there needs to come a point in a person's life